Okay, so we've got a few little things on the go. Show you the important bit first. We've finished the actual cockpit now, and as you can see, we've got a couple of crew members installed into that. Now, to be honest, my figure painting is absolutely atrocious. It's something I really need to work on if I'm going to carry on putting crew in, hence why this is the first time any of my models ever had crew in. Okay, we need some hoses in there just at the moment, but for the moment that really completes the cockpit actual areas. So it's still got a few wires and cables I'm going to put in here, a couple of oxygen bottles, things like that, obviously oxygen mask hoses, things like that. But basically that brings a close to that part. A couple of things I've been doing. First off is I put the centre spine together. Now this is one of those quite very noticeable areas for me to do. So I pumped full of super glue on the inside. And we come along the outside and I've sanded, and literally just by sanding alone has managed to eliminate 90% of the actual seam line that runs through the middle. But this is really, really noticeable on this one. If you were doing a standard version, then obviously you don't have to worry about it, hence it comes in the split, which is a lot easier to work with. But when you're going to have this sat on the top, it's going to be very noticeable and stand out. So that's why we're taking a bit of care with this one. Let it dry totally, sanded, filled and everything else, just to go around and make it all very nice. And then we're just going to pop around with our polishing one and just polish up everywhere to make sure we're scratch free. But as I said, I've had to pop in a few other panel lines. It's very straightforward to do, but as I say, one of those ones you want to take care of to make sure it's okay. The other thing we've done now is we've installed the fan blade. You can see in there, obviously just a bit of piece goes in. Make sure you get the right one because it is kit specific. Obviously for this one being the I version, obviously uses a different type of engine, hence it's got the new one in there, which looks very nice. The other thing also I've done, giving it a coat of the actual clear, Johnson's clear, or pledge, whichever you want to call it, or any type of gloss, just in there. Two things it'll do. First of all, it will help make a nicer looking interior down into these inside bits. Also, it will protect it a little bit as well. So we've done exactly the same on this one. So it's now a little bit glossy in there, because when you look at these things in real life, they look quite plasticky inside. Which they are, I know, but that's the type of thing we're going through. Now, you might remember earlier we were saying about this intake, we couldn't get the fibre optics in, and this is the problem, because we have our fibre optic. This one's a bit thicker than we normally use, but this is the fibre optic. To feed this in down here, there's no gap for it to go down, okay, so it's always going to be a bit of an issue. So we'd have to use a very thin fibre optic, and then we're not going to get the type of light we can use. So what we're using is these little guys. Now these are the ones we explained earlier, these little seed ones, and they fit very, very nicely down. Now if you were doing the normal F-16, these would fit just as well, because they literally would just pop in the actual holes just like that, and then you obviously have the clear part goes on the outside. Job done. Really nice, good looking parts. Very, very easy to work with. This one, however, we have got some lumps and bumps that are going to go on these and extend out slightly. We've got some resin replacement ones, and the trouble with working with resin like this means we've got to carve it up to get into it. Not a big biggie, but what we'll do in a moment when we get a bit closer, we'll have a look at the difference between the kit part and the resin, and is it worth all the extra work to try and do it. In the meantime, what we need to do is get this sort of boxed up. So what we can do, we can take the top of the intake, okay, and then what we need to do is literally just sit these in. So we come up with 1 and 2. And what we want to do is get the out part in, and then that way we can just push it all back in when we're done. So what we'll do just for the moment, we're just going to slip these cables through so they're hanging out of the outside, you can see, just like that. Okay, I'm going to grab a rubber band for this just to hold it in place just for the moment. So we're just going to pop the other side in as well. So the same type of configuration. That way we can literally push these in and feed them in and out as is required. Okay, and then we're just going to come along with our extra thin, and we'll take care of this seam, because again this is going to be one of those very noticeable seams on F-16s. You get some very noticeable areas. Okay, so seam again. It's not too much of a problem in here because we can tidy up afterwards. But this is what we were saying about making sure we had the right clearance with the nose gear, because otherwise without it, it puts a lot of pressure onto this area. So we're happy how that is. Just touch it in, got a bit of glue on the go there. We've got a small gap down the back here, which what I'm going to do, I'm not going to worry about it for the moment. We're just literally going to keep an eye on it. And if it becomes too much of a problem, then perhaps we'll deal with it. So I'm going to hold this in position just like so, just so it starts to get a bite on it. Then we can talk about this little area down the back here. A few places on the internet, they actually explain that it's wrong. The trouble is, I've got reference photos, which unfortunately I can't show you because the person who's lent them to me doesn't want them to be sort of openly on the internet. I think he might be planning a book or something. But anyway, it does show it with quite a shallow intake gap between the top and the bottom. Now a lot of people have gone along and said, oh, it has this, that and the other. It does seem to be the correct parts, just doesn't seem to have quite as much clearance as it has. So what you could do is just put a shim of plastic card on the top of this V shape at the top here, just to make it sit a little bit better, make it a little bit prominent. But there again, you look at different photos, it seems to have different type of references and different type of gaps depending on how the photo is taken, whereabouts on the intake. If it's higher down, you can see quite a noticeable gap. If it's lower down, you can't really see it. But as I say, it's one of those ones where it, you know, it would be handy if there was some definitive sort of proof with it. But as I say, it depends on which way you look at it. So we'll just let that dry off a moment. Okay, so we're just working on this intake. Okay, so we've got it together and we're glued up. Quite happy with how that is. But what we need to do now is obviously just raise this step just by around about 1 mil. Now, you can obviously put strips of plastic card and all the rest of it in, but the easiest way I find, if you just come along with a bit of paper, okay, and just give it a rub, like a brass rubbing. Okay. That now gives you your shape that you're going to need. You can see it embossed in there. So then you can take a piece of plastic card, off bit, spare bit kicking around. That'll be handy. And then what you can do is literally just transfer this over. And so the easiest way is we'll just lay it on there. Okay. And then we'll just pop a knife up against it. Okay, just cutting the paper, literally 2 passes should be enough so we can see where it is. Obviously holding your paper nice and steady. Come along, remember you cut into the inside one. Just making sure we are on the right line. Okay. It helps if the paper plays ball. And that gives us our approximate size. So what we can do is we'll just pop this in so we know how big this has got to be. So we know it comes down to roughly about here. I'll just mark that. And then what we do is just score that as well. So we just go like that, we just complete this line out the front. Okay, and then with the old wiggle test, you should be able to just pop it out like that. Okay, tap that one out like that, and then hopefully you come along and it should, as does, which is a major miracle, fit just on the end, just like that. So I'm really happy with how that came out, especially doing it live just like that. It's always a bit of thing. Just clean up the sharp edges, just so it sits better. Bottom. Okay, and I must admit I saw loads of things on the internet where people corrected this little problem and they're messing around with fillers and all the rest of it, and I'm thinking, why? So as I always say, if you can do it simply, do it simply. Okay, so what we're going to do, we'll just pop that, literally it's just going to fit in just like that. Come on, bit of glue on the top. Okay, using the push movement. Hold that down. Okay, happy how that is. Bit of glue on the sides just so it welds in. Touch around the back. Capillary action will do all the work on this one, but the thing is, this will be now up into this soft area up the top here, so you're not even really going to see it. You'll see a faint outline of it, but what it should do now is just make a far better, neater, cleaner join in there. I don't want to go pushing this in because the glue will sit in. But there we go, that's what we've actually done. Just makes our sandwich, just makes it a little bit bigger, and I've gone up by 1mm, which is hardly anything on the great scheme of things. Okay, so we're moving through. You can probably see down here, we've painted up the actual wheel well. Dead simple, literally good references on this. There's plenty of them on the net or books. Basically, battery's done red. We've got the bottle over here, it's been done steel. And then all the rest of it, we've just popped around roughly and done all the cables and things like that. And it really brings it to life. And that's the difference between a resin part and a plastic, because the plastic one, then obviously you'd have to go around and wire it all up yourself, so we don't have that trouble with that, and it really brings it to life. And because you're going to see it somewhat at about this type of angle, that it's well worth doing. Now we're still working on this light switch, so now this is where the big changes are going to happen. Obviously we've got an update set with all these resin bits and everything else, so what we need to do now is start to fix some of these on. Now these are the resin larger and more detailed little pods which go where the nav lights are. Okay, now make sure you get them the right way round, because they are specific, because there's an access panel to the rear and these fit over the top of it. Okay, so what we want to do now is drill a small hole through just to start with. So he says looking for his tools. So we want, that will do. So we're just going to put in, for the moment, a small pilot hole down through. It's a bit out of the way and we bring it a bit closer, you can see what we're up to. So we just put a pilot hole in through this. So we're just going to drill him through. And as I say, just take your time when you're putting holes through anything, because obviously it's better to check. So every now and again we pull back out, clean it out, because we don't want to break the bit off, which is my usual trick. Okay, so just every now and again pull it back out. Now if you aren't using the update set, or perhaps you're not worried about with the electrics and the wiring what we're doing here, you're going for straightforward build, then obviously just plug these on as you would. The kit parts aren't bad at all. You've got some nice riveting detail on there as well. So we're just popping this in. So once you're through, what you can actually do, he says, desperately trying to get through, always the way, right. There we go, we're in. Okay, so once you're through, the way I do it, leave it quite large to the outside and then come along with a larger bit like this, just off to one side. Okay, start chunking your way through. Okay, and then what happens is you carry on going in the back like that, and then once you're through, you should end up with a hole at the back like this. Okay, and then we've got a little opening at the front. Now the reason why I did that was literally with a blade, we just come in, okay, and we just chip away at it all the way through, and then what we do, we've got our little wires which we have hanging out, so we'll fold him down so it just fits in a lot easier. Okay, now we're just going to thread this one through, try and keep them flat as they pass through. There we go, and then once he's flat you can level him out on the outside, a bit of a 90-degree twist. Okay, and that little one will sit just on the outside like that, okay? And what we'll do, obviously we'll glue it all in position in there. So we'll just retract the cable. So by literally just pulling this cable back, it should all go into place. Okay, and what we can do, you can then super glue this one into position. Now have a look at your references to see how they go, because some of them, there's a little panel on the rear where this little curve area underneath goes through, but what you want to make sure is that it's a good height, okay, it's orientated the right way and everything else like that. So if we just from the other side work out exactly how it's going to be, so it's going to be about halfway down. So it is going to be something around about this area here, and it will fit in just like that. Looks like a hammerhead shark from this angle. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to put both of these on, super glue those into place, okay, and give them a wipe round to make sure they're set and all happy. We can take care of any seams and joints and everything else that needed to at the moment. We're not going to put this front collar on yet because it's going to be painted a different colour and it'll just make it hard work. But what we will do is, in a moment, we'll install the little the vane that goes down. You could put it in beforehand, and to be honest, I normally do, but I do know they fit in. You can clip them and then they fit in. So if you are painting the silver, you don't get them scraped off as you're poking them through. So we just get these bits done. Okay, so now we can get this fitted in. I've polished up and sanded all the areas all flat. We used a little bit of Mr. Surfacer and the thinners technique just to get those pods, and what I've done, put a little bit of tape on the end just to protect the LEDs. Now this is going to be the sort of make or break crunch time. So okay, we've got this little plate in here as you said before, and what we want to do is get this down. Now the only trouble with all these cables is they tend to get in the way, so make sure you feed them all through first. So what we're going to do is feed the front part in, okay, and sit that in, and then just see how it's looking, and it should give you a bit of a gap just like that, which I'm very happy with, and it all still feeds up into the inside a-okay. So we're quite happy with how that is sort of sitting. So what we want to do is sort of do a little test fit first, make sure it's sat in all the right locations, and it actually fits pretty well. I don't know if that little glove at the front that we've put in has helped the spread and the gap, but before when I test fitted we had a gap down here, but you can see we're actually almost perfect down the back now with that in. So we want to glue this now in place, so taking our little sweet tie with us just to make sure it's all in and everyone is happy how it is. And I must admit, I am impressed with the way this has gone. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tack it in place at the front, just with a bit of super glue just down there. And then what I'll do, we'll get that lined in. Okay, and we'll just hold that in place. Then when that's in place, what we can do, we can actually get our finger in behind here to make it right, and we're going to tack it with super glue as we go around, and then we can go around with the liquid glue everywhere, a little bit of putty, thinner technique to take care of all that seam, and that should be nice. But I must admit, with that little glove in there, as you can see, it really does make a very nice fit. This is the last of the awkward bits now, because now we're in quite straightforward territory for the build. We've got the electrics obviously to get into the nose wheel, because we're going to have a nose wheel light. So what I've done is I've drilled a very small hole. You can see it, there it is, just down in there. Okay, so the seed will go through, we can feed it through and just have it dangling in here for the moment, then it'll be attached to the nose wheel door a little bit later on. But what we need to do is just get the plumbing, the wiring all sorted out, all fed through. Another little thing we've just done, we're just doing some test fitting here on the canopy. See that hole down the back? That is just the original spine hole, but obviously we need the electrics to come up onto the inside. Now I'm still tempted to put in a little panel that we can open up just down the back here, somewhere like in here, so if needed we can get to the electrics again, because I'm a little bit concerned, as with all these builds, you put them together, they work fine, you go through the painting stage, come out the other end, and because this has got a microchip in it, it's if that's going to fail, that will be the area that's going to do it. Right, that's in there now, so what we're going to do is just flip this over. And what we're going to do is just put a tiny bit of super glue just in the inside there, and grab our cocktail stick and just smear this around the inside a little bit. Okay, flip it over to see how it's looking. It's looking pretty good, so we're going to hit it with a bit of kicker. Okay, just to get that into rough place. Make sure you're in a well ventilated area when using super glue and kicker, because otherwise it can cause all types of problems. Right, so good we've stuck our finger to it, which at least means we go through. But as you can probably see, what I'm very happy with, that seam, not bad, for a little first attempt just like that. So by the time we get in here with some thin glue and run it around, we should be pretty much in place without any major work. So we're going to come along with our thin glue, as we said, and we're just going to flood the areas all down in here. I'll just paint the entire join. Somebody asked me recently why I do both. The thing is, I only use super glue to tack it in place. The trouble with super glue is it's fine for little jobs, but if you're doing a big thing, it can be a real pain to actually use it, because it can crack, you see, and it shatters, and before you know it, you're back to square one with multiple builds and things like that. So if you've got it down a seam line, down a spine or something like that, it can cause you a real headache if you've got to go down and re-glue it. And to be honest, I had that trouble a while ago with one of my previous builds. It was a World War II bomber, and the thing is, when I sanded the spine, I ended up cracking the super glue, which made an awful mess, and then I had to end up completely redoing the entire thing. So that's why we use thin glues as well. So what we've got here, as you can probably see it just down the front here, if I can get this to kick in, we've got a tiny little gap where obviously we've got that new plate, so you need to take care of that. So you can either get to it from the front, or you can use a little bit of resin or something in there just to take care of this small little gap. And there we go. There we have our base in there now, which was a nice job to do. So what you can do now is come along and start feeding in your wiring. Now, it's going to be a bit complicated, because what we need to do, if we just bring you out a bit, I can explain what we need to do. This bottom well, as we know, is done, so that's literally a straightforward drop fit, which we'll get in there and pull and push it all around in a moment. But basically that's going to sit in there like that, which gives us our bottom well. Trouble is, as soon as that goes in, we cannot get now to the nose wheel for that hole, which you can probably see it just down in there, and that's what we need to get to feed the electrics. The electrics from that, which I must admit wasn't the best idea in the way, is on the nose section. So these need to feed through all the way back down, and also we need to bring out the master live wires that are going to come out. Now, where are they going to come out? Obviously, we ideally want them to come out through the undercarriage or something else like that, or certainly down via the centre line of the actual aircraft. So it might be the best bet is to try and bring it down here, and then we can bring it down undercarriage. So now we need is to put a hole somewhere in here. Now obviously we don't want to go through the actual intake, we need to just do a little one from the top. So what we'll do is we'll spot a little area where we can run our cables down. So we're looking really for an opening somewhere down here. So what we'll do is we're going to bring it in, I think roughly around about here would be a nice little area to have the wire, because that way we can then include it into the rest of the model. So we just bring that down, and we're just going to open up a bit bigger hole. It's very thin, this part here, so just be careful. We're just going to open up that hole, and that is where we're going to run our power will come out through. Now the thing is as well, when you're dealing with your wiring here, don't be using big thick cables, you know, this type of size, because obviously you're never going to feed them around here. The thinner your cable you can get, this is great stuff. This stuff's like a hair, you know, this is like, you know, I don't know, 0.2 mil copper wire. Absolutely great. It's insulated as well, so you don't have to worry about it. So that will do for those. So what we need to do now, let this front side area just dry a couple of minutes just to go off, so then we can start playing around with it, and we can then try and marry up these two halves. Now in the meantime as well, as I said, we put on the bracket for the rear here, for the spine. So also what we need to do is put on these little blocks in here, which the tail planes are going to go on. Open up any holes. So obviously we've opened up the nose holes for the identification friend or foe system, or bird shredder as it's known, on the front, and any holes that are needed on the belly. So go and have a look at your instructions for obviously kit specific, different aircraft, different types of thing, and that will give you a rundown of what you're going to need. Right, so we're in a nice position now to really get it together, but we still need to just worry about the electrics now. What we've got here is a twin little great one, which looks very, very similar to the actual landing bay lights, the one that's on the nose wheel door cover. So that one is going to go in that hole that we drilled. There you go, just down in there. So we're just actually going to feed that one through. So as we get in, there we go, that one is in. So we know it's going to need a little bit of slack in there. So what I'm going to do is just fold it back on itself, put it down there, and then we'll just take a little bit of tape, okay, because we're going to keep it all nice and safe. So literally we're just going to tape it in the bay, tape it down, so we don't want it being yanked out and pulled through. So that's that one in like that. So now we have the cable up. I've taped one side, which is obviously going to be the positive and negative. I still roughly can remember, because obviously we're going to have lots of wires hanging out of this absolutely everywhere. So that one now can come round. And this one has got to go to the front of the actual aircraft. I could have probably done with a little bit more slack on the cable, would have been more handy. Okay, because then this is going to have to wire in to this one here, which obviously got the positive, and then that will sit in just like so. So now that one is in, it means we can now actually install this main gear. Area can go in. Now it's a little bit fiddly just to get in, because obviously we want a nice seam across the top here, so we're looking pretty almost seamless as you look down it. Okay, but it is a little bit of a handful, making sure you've got the fronts and the rears all sat in correctly and square. Okay, that one is in, so when you look inside it should look pretty close. What we're going to have to do, I think, is pop in there with a little bit of white paint, because you can see a ring around it, which is quite noticeable. But with that one in there now like that, we're just making sure it's sitting correctly, and we're making sure it's sitting square, so it needs a small little twist, so it's all lining up everywhere spot on. Happy how that is, although it's just jumped. There's the way. Let's try that again. Front in first, then the rear in. Okay, so this is one of those ones we've got to make sure it's right. Okay, so we're happy how that one is in. So just taking our super glue, seam down both the back ones, and we'll let the capillary action follow that down so they meet in the middle. That's in, just a speed, drop a kicker, just to get that all working. Now, just for the moment, we're just going to concentrate on the back. So we just give this a run. Make sure it's welded up properly down this back. Just run so the capillary action is going up and down. There we go. So we check the front, that's looking nice in there. Looking down, doesn't look too bad in there. So what we'll do now, we'll do exactly the same on the front. Both halves. And again, bit of kick up down in that, just so it carries it around all the area. And then what we'll do, we'll just do a couple of spots on the side, just to make sure happy how it is everywhere. A bit more kicker. And then just a touch along the top little bit of seam, just to hold that in place. And as I say, we'll get in there with a brush with a little bit of white paint, and hopefully that will take care. It's literally just the tiniest of seam running around in there, but I'm not exactly happy how it's sitting, so hopefully that will take care of that. So we just dry that down. Okay, that is on there now. Now, as I said before, we've got the top open, so we can have all the wiring and everything else is going to sit out the top, because when you do poke this on, if we just sit this in here roughly, we've got a little bit of a gap at the top, but then obviously we're going to have a loose fit on this top one so we can get to it, because the microchip is going to go down in there just like that. But at the same time, we need to be able to get the main power feed in through this hole, which is down here, which is going to come down. I'm going to run it around the wiring and probably bring it down a leg and do it just like that for the moment. Now, the other thing we were talking about as well is having a system, so it's literally like a plug-in fit. So when it comes in, it literally just drops down into there with an acrylic rod coming through. So, you know, really you have to make the decision on how that is actually going to sit. We do have the centre line tank and everything else, but before we bring it together, I want to get the centre line basically built with the tank so we can see actually how it's all going to go and the geometry. So hopefully when we come in, we can just push this down. The acrylic pole will just be very, very thin. You won't hardly see it and will just pop through. So what we need to do now, before we can get these two halves all buttoned up and everything, is to get the centre line sorted out.